The sky above Kalin's world had not known color in months. Ash filtered every sunrise into a dull smear of gray, and the winds that once carried the scent of tilled soil now stank of oxidized metal and scorched dreams. He had been digging through the bones of a collapsed forge, not for weapons, those were long gone, but for tools, handles, anything that might still hold shape. That was when the Vex came. They did not descend like conquerors. They emerged from the dust like ghosts, faceless, armored, cold. Kalin remembered only a humming in his ears, and a hand too strong for any man dragging him upward by the collar. The last thing he saw of his world was the silhouette of his broken anvil, still standing among the rubble like a gravestone. Now, he stood inside a different kind of grave. The sanctum was unlike anything forged by mortal hands, a vast hollow cathedral of obsidian stone hung suspended over a chasm that fell into forever. The air was sterile, humming with psionic interference. Every footstep echoed not just in sound, but in sensation like vibrations inside the skull. Kalin's rough tunic chafed against his skin, the fabric worn thin from days of transport, but he held himself tall. He would not kneel for them. Before him stood the architect of this place, Vorlo, warlord of the Ninth Vex Axis. His skin like unpolished granite, and his armor seamless, grown rather than built. His eyes were pits of black static, unreadable. Vorlo spoke not with grandeur, but with bored authority. "You are a smith. You will make her useful." Kalin turned his eyes upward. She floated at the center of the abyss, bound in a cage of pure, psionic force. Her form shimmered, with unstable light, part shape, part shadow, endlessly shifting like fire seen through water. There was no face, and yet he saw her. Horns curved like obsidian crescents, hair like nebulae tumbling down her back. Her body pulsed with restrained potential, tethered at every limb by lines of energy that crackled and hummed with unbearable pressure. "She is Zelia," Vorlo said flatly, "a relic of the old powers. The Vex do not worship gods. We use them. She is inefficient. You will fix that." Kalin said nothing. He could hear his own heartbeat, felt the way the stone beneath him vibrated like a living thing. He had once crafted swords that sang when drawn, and plows that hummed with potential. Now he was being asked to forge a leash. "For your service," Vorlo added, as if the notion was generous, "you will be granted 3 wishes. Anything. A world, a resurrection, a death undone. Wishes." The word curled in Kalin's mind like smoke. He had wished before, when the Vex plague took his daughter, when his apprentice Era screamed under falling steel, when he had buried hope beneath the anvil. Wishes were lies, but he saw the path to power. He looked past Vorlo, past the cruel mockery of kindness, and met the gaze of the goddess. Though her eyes were fire and her skin was the color of deep starlight, he saw something ancient in the way her light flickered, a fatigue that mirrored his own. "I accept," he said at last, his voice like cooled iron. Vorlo gestured, expecting gratitude, some plea for glory. Kalin ignored him. He stepped forward, closer to the terminal that displayed Zelia's form. The hum grew louder. "For my first wish," he said, clear and sharp, "I want a proper forge, a hearth of tan granite, bellows of Cathar leather, hammers of graduated weight from tungsten carbide alloy. I want cavorite ingots, whisper steel, and 100 kilos of raw nag, unworked, the kind found only in the heart of dying stars." The silence was immediate and suffocating. Vorlo's head jerked. "You dare?" But the hum changed. A melodic undertone rippled through the sanctum. From the sphere of energy, the goddess shimmered brighter, and then she trembled. The light of her body flickered, the shape of her lips barely parting. Her voice came not as words, but as resonance. Granted. With a soundless explosion, the Vex forge vanished. In its place, stone by stone, shimmer by shimmer, rose a cathedral of heat and iron. The hearth glowed softly. The air tasted of carbon and cooled steel. Tools lined the wall, perfect in weight and balance. Vorlo's fury darkened his features, but he said nothing. Kalin stepped forward, his fingers brushing the surface of an anvil that sang to his touch. From her prison, Zelia watched. In 10,000 years, no one had asked for tools. No one had asked to build. And she trembled. The forge was alive. Not in the way Kalin once knew where. Bellows moved with rhythm and fire licked at the steel with familiar breath, but alive in a deeper, more ancient way. The hearth hummed with energy that responded to his presence, resonated to the beat of his heart, as though the stone itself remembered his name. When he touched the hammer, it whispered. When he quenched steel in the mineral-rich trough, it sang. But even surrounded by everything he had wished for, Kalin could feel the pressure of eyes, both those of the Vex guards watching from sterile platforms, and the eyes of something far more dangerous, far more curious. Zelia. She had not spoken again since granting the wish, but he could feel her presence, a slow pulse of awareness, like a deep tide brushing the edges of his mind. He was building the amplifier according to the schematics they had provided: interlocking alloys, psionic channel nodes, finely tuned frequency coils, but his hands worked on two planes, one for them and one for her. Each strike of the hammer rang, not just in metal, but in thought. The Vex engineers monitored from behind thick glass, evaluating resonance fields and thermal output. They saw nothing suspicious, but Kalin was not forging their amplifier. Not exactly. Hidden beneath layers of psionic casing, he had begun weaving something else into the core. A disruption lattice. A series of microspikes, forged from whisper steel, attuned to her containment frequency. The difference was invisible to the eye, but the metal knew. It was during the fourth day that her voice returned. Not in sound, but in feeling. A warmth in his chest. A whisper not made by breath, but memory. Why? The word came wrapped in wonder and suspicion. Why build for me? Why not ask for your family back? For vengeance? He did not answer aloud. He kept hammering, but his hands trembled just a little. Later that night, they let him rest. He was given a cell of white stone and a nutrient bar with the texture of sand and the taste of rot. He sat in the corner, letting the dull artificial light flicker across his calloused hands. And then the room shifted. The wall rippled. Not physically, but psychically. He closed his eyes and felt it, her presence. I didn't come here to save you, he whispered aloud, as if she could hear. I came here to survive. Silence. Then, softer than breath, but you forged salvation. Anyway. He did not sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because of what he had begun to feel when she touched his mind. Beneath the endless coils of power and rage was loneliness. A grief so wide, it felt like a galaxy in collapse. The next morning, they brought him before Vorlo. The warlord's mood was darker. You've worked well, human, he said, voice tight. Her energy spikes are rising. We sense stabilization. You will continue, and you will now take your second wish. Kalin stood quietly. The forge heat still clung to his skin, sweat drying across scars. Vorlo's guards stared, waiting. For greed or foolishness? Power, immortality, revenge? But Kalin's voice was calm. I wish for a meal. The guards blinked. Vorlo's expression cracked in disbelief. A meal? Kalin nodded, eyes fixed on the containment field. With her. 1 hour. Not as a goddess. Not as a battery. As a woman. The air changed. A sudden pulse. Not energy. Not heat. Something deeper. Like the sanctum itself flinched. You dare request? Vorlo started, stepping forward, fury rising. But a sharp, crystalline note cut through the room like a sword through silk. Every light dimmed. Zelia's form pulsed within her prison. For the first time, she became still, focused. The air trembled with her voice, not through sound, but through truth. Granted, The containment field did not vanish, but it bent. With a hiss of shifting pressure and collapsing geometry, a pathway formed like a throat, opening inside the sanctum. The guards stepped back, unsure, unready, and she stepped forward. She was no longer pure light, not a storm of energy. She was shaped, made flesh. Sapphire skin shimmered under glowing lines of restraint. Her horns curved elegantly. Her hair flowed like smoke touched by stars. She wore a garment forged from psionic filaments, part metal, part starlight, hugging the shape of a woman who had not walked as one in eons. She stepped onto the forge floor, and the stone beneath her feet sighed. Kalin did not bow. He simply gestured to the far side of the hearth, where he had placed 2 heated stones, and prepared the only thing he could: slightly seared protein slabs, and water heated over forged flames. She looked at him as if he had rewritten the laws of physics. "You are mad," she said, her voice rich and alien and amused. "No," Kalin replied, handing her the stone plate. "Just tired of building things that kill." They sat, they ate, in silence. The food was terrible, but the moment was divine. She watched him the way a dying sun watches the last orbiting planet, and when their fingers brushed as she took the plate, she flinched it in pain but in memory. She trembled, and, for the first time in 10,000 years, the goddess felt seen. The forge had never been so quiet. Even the eternal hum of the sanctum seemed to recede, like it too was holding its breath. Zelia sat opposite Kalin, the blue glow of her skin softened by the firelight. She had not spoken for several minutes, but her eyes never left him. They weren't the eyes of a goddess, not anymore. They were the eyes of a woman trying to remember what it meant to be. Kalin chewed slowly. The food was dry and bitter, but he ate with Caritrio more than nourishment. He'd smoothed the stone plates by hand, seared the protein until it sizzled, poured the water into hand-hammered vessels of whisper steel. Every detail mattered. It was the first thing he had made not to survive but to share. "You burned this," Zelia said at last, voice low. He nodded. "Closest I've come to a home-cooked meal in years." She tilted her head. "It tastes like thunder, loud, confused." Her lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "But I feel something." He looked at her then, really looked. No longer a vortex of light or a battery of infinite force, but a woman with shoulders that sloped with exhaustion, with a mouth unused to smiling, with fingers too long and graceful for a weapon. He held out a small piece of blackened ration. "Try this." She took it without hesitation. Their fingers brushed again and, this time, the spark between them was not metaphor. A shock surged through them both sidetic, pure, searing. Kalin's vision fractured. Suddenly he stood beneath a crimson sun, the sky swirling with iridescent fire. He saw her as she once was, laughing radiant, walking barefoot through crystalline cities, with another being, tall and graceful, whose hand she held like a secret. Then came the fire. Not from above, but from within. A silence that swallowed worlds, a collapse, not of buildings, but of reality. The other's hand slipped from hers. "Gone," he gasped, yanked back to the forge, sweat on his brow. Zelia's eyes shimmered. "That was not for you to see." "I didn't mean to," Kalin whispered. "It wasn't mine either." She nodded, breath catching in her throat. "But you held it, and you didn't look away." He wiped a trembling hand across his face. "I know what it's like to carry ghosts." She set the plate down, the gesture slow, reverent. "You don't speak like a prisoner." He chuckled darkly. "I'm a blacksmith. I speak like fire." Her eyes narrowed, then softened. "They will demand your third wish soon, I know. You could ask for anything: power, vengeance, freedom." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "They've taken everything. My world, my daughter, my apprentice. But even when I begged for miracles, nothing came. And now?" He leaned closer, his voice low. "Now, I understand. The gods don't give miracles. They need them to. Something flickered in her. A starlight pulse behind her eyes. Fear. No longing. But even longing was dangerous here. Suddenly, the sanctum's ambient hum returned loud, agitated. The pathway that allowed Zelia to exist in flesh began to retract, shimmering with psionic static. The hour was over. Guards appeared at the chamber's edge, faceless and stiff. One of them spoke through a filtered voice amplifier. Return. To containment. Now. Zelia did not move. Neither did Kalin. The guard took a step forward. Do not test us. Zelia turned her head slowly, fire igniting behind her eyes. Not enough to attack, but enough to make the guards hesitate. She looked at Kalin once more. I don't want to go back, she said. I know, he said softly. There. Fingers brushed one last time. A farewell. Or maybe a promise. She stepped back into the pathway, her form fracturing into fractal energy. Swallowed by the containment field, she was gone. Kalin stared into the space she had occupied. The forge seemed colder, the fire more silent. He stood, every movement stiff, deliberate. He walked back to the anvil. He picked up his hammer, and with each strike, he began to build something the Vex could not imagine. A weapon in the shape of freedom, a key to break a goddess. But first, it had to sing. The hammer struck like thunder in a cathedral of silence. Each blow echoed not just through the forge, but through the living bones of the sanctum itself. Kalin was no longer shaping metal. He was composing a requiem, a song of grief, rebellion, and something even more dangerous, hope. The Vex watched from their polished galleries, eyes like dead stars behind their masks, unaware of the symphony building under their feet. They thought he was refining the amplifier. They praised his precision, lauded the purity of the alloys he crafted. What they didn't see, what they couldn't feel, was that the forge had changed. It answered not to their diagrams, but to intent, and his intent was war. Not the kind that burned cities, the kind that rewrote fate. The resonance key was hidden in plain sight, its core harmonics indistinguishable from their design. But Kalin knew better. It pulsed with a rhythm only he and one other could feel, and she felt it. Zelia reached out to him in whispers, not with words, but with warmth, brushing the edge of his consciousness like breath against glass. When he faltered, exhausted and shaking, her presence steadied him. When his grief crept into his hands, making them tremble, she pushed back not to silence it, but to share it. They became partners in silence, co-conspirators in rhythm, and when Vorlo demanded final calibrations, Kalin made a request that rippled through the sanctum like a fault line. I need her, he said calmly. The amplifier must match her resonance signature. To do that, she has to be present, in flesh. Vorlo stared, cold, calculating. You want the goddess in your forge? Kalin didn't blink. You want results. I need the subject. No more projections. The room fell quiet. The warlord considered. The Vex did not fear her not anymore. She had been caged for millennia, reduced to a resource, a generator for their empire. Eventually, Vorlo gave a single nod. 1 hour. She is to be monitored. If she dies, Zelia materialized at twilight. The forge lights cast long shadows across her skin, which shimmered like moonlit frost. She said nothing at first, only looked around the space like it was a dream she barely believed. Her feet touched the stone with reverence. Her breath was soft and sharp all at once. Kalin handed her a piece of metal. Touch it, he said. She did, and the forge responded. The temperature shifted by 1/2 degree. The anvil's hum bent slightly. The flame curved in a new direction, as if pulled toward her. I told them I needed your signature, Kalin said. That wasn't a lie. She tilted her head. But that's not why I'm here. No, he admitted. It isn't. They worked together in whispers. He passed her tools. She held components as he etched hidden glyphs into the heart of the amplifier. They moved like dancers in a storm body's close, minds closer. Every time their hands met, the bond deepened. Every time her fingers brushed his skin, a new memory opened between them. She showed him a snowfall on a world that no longer existed, where crystalline trees rang like bells in the wind. He showed her a child's drawing, smudged with soot, the last thing his daughter gave him before she died. It was not romantic. It was holy. But desire was building like a fault line under pressure. That evening, Kalin adjusted the final clamp on the harness that would hold the amplifier to her body a lie. Of course, it was designed to sync with her neural lattice and mask the resonance key within. To sell it, he said, you have to wear it. She stood still. He stepped behind her. The straps wrapped around her waist, her shoulders, her back. His fingers moved slowly, not because he needed to but because he wanted to remember. Her skin was cool. His hands were calloused. Her breath caught. She tilted her head slightly, and their eyes met shade in brown, fire and earth. His hands rested on her shoulders, his chest barely an inch from her back. The forge heat was nothing compared to what roared between them. Her voice broke the silence, barely more than a thought in his mind. Everything with you is so loud. He leaned in. Then let's be quiet. Together. She turned. Their foreheads touched. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just the collision of two people on the edge of becoming. But then the forge lights flickered. A low pulse surged through the floor. The Vex were watching. She stepped back. Kalin returned to the anvil, and the resonance key pulsed with a heartbeat only they could hear. It was nearly ready, and when it sang, the universe would burn. The forge had never burned hotter. Kalin hadn't slept in 3 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands blistered, and the air reeked of scorched tungsten and cracked nigonite. But the resonance key was almost complete, an object not meant to harness power, but to unmake it. Every strike of the hammer was a countdown. Every glowing line etched into the frame was another whisper of treason, and the sanctum knew. The living structure around him had begun to react. Its pulses were off rhythm, its psionic fields more erratic. It sensed something was wrong, but not yet what. Kalin could feel it in the walls, a growing agitation, a heartbeat without a body. Zelia appeared again that night, unannounced, unscheduled, and unpermitted. The guards conditioned to obey, but not understand, had simply let her pass after she uttered one psionic word, necessary. She entered the forge like a thunderstorm, slipping through a crack in a window, barefoot, unadorned. Her glow was subdued now, like fire behind fogged glass, but her presence filled the chamber like gravity. You're dying, she said, her voice both accusation and confession. Kalin didn't look up from the ingot he was shaping. Then I'm doing it right? She came closer. You've tied the resonance core to the sanctum's central artery. When it shatters, the backlash will pass through you. I know. You'll be reduced to ash, bone dust, less than thought. He finally looked at her. No more cages, he said. Not even yours. Silence. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing the side of his jaw, thumb tracing the silver scar beneath his cheekbone. There has to be another way. There isn't. Her voice cracked. Then, let me die. He gripped her hand and placed it over the warm surface of the almost finished key. There is no we if you're gone, he said. I won't survive a galaxy that chains gods and burns girls for learning to forge steel. Her eyes flared dread into ultraviolet, grief into fury. But she said nothing more, because they both knew the truth. The presentation to Vorlo would happen in hours. Kalin didn't sleep. He poured every ounce of memory, love, fury, and defiance into the key's final etchings. It wasn't a weapon of war, it was an epitaph carved in fire. And when he finished, he wept, not loudly, not with sobs, but with hands that shook as he laid down the hammer for the last time. When he entered the great sanctum chamber, every Vex elite was present. Black-armored titans lined the perimeter. High priests chanted meaningless syllables to appease a god they didn't believe in. Vorlo stood tall, his expression smug, expectant. Kalin walked to the center dais with the resonance key in his hands. It pulsed faintly, humming a perfect psionic note. He was not afraid, because this was what he was forged to do. It is done, Vorlo declared. The amplifier that will reshape empires. He reached for the device. Kalin stepped back. A ripple passed through the chamber. No, Kalin said, voice calm, steady. You don't get to touch it. Vorlo's smile faded. Excuse me? You think this is a tool? Kalin continued. But you don't understand tools. You conquer them, drain them, chain them. You don't listen to them. A low murmur passed through the Vex ranks. Kalin turned to the containment sphere. Zelia floated within, her form burning hotter than he had ever seen it, like a star waiting to collapse. I don't build siphons, he said, louder now. I build keys. Vorlo's voice rose, a warning and a growl. Kill him, but the words were too late, because Zelia moved, not as a prisoner, not as a battery, as a goddess. The containment field shattered like glass struck by sound. Light real, living conscious, light exploded outward. Vex guards were hurled against walls. Their armor cracked and smoked where her energy touched. And Kalin turned, walked into the forge, and slammed the resonance key into the heart of the sanctum's central artery. A sound erupted, not heard but felt, like the scream of an ancient god cracking its spine. The walls bled light. The sanctum convulsed, writhing as the key began to unravel its song. Kalin's body convulsed, his muscles locking, bones fracturing. His vision went white, then black. Zelia saw him fall, saw the price of her freedom, and for the first time in 10,000 years, she chose to be more than divine. She chose to be human. She knelt beside his dying form and poured herself into him, her essence, her fire, her soul. Not as salvation, not as debt, but as love. The sanctum died screaming. The forge went silent. And when it was done, they were no longer prisoner and smith. They were something new, and the galaxy would never be ready. Darkness. That was the first thing Kalin remembered. Not silence, because the void wasn't silent. It pulsed. It groaned. It sang like a forge cooling after 1,000 years of fire. But the light was gone. The pain was gone. So was he. Until he wasn't. Until her voice, not spoken, but poured like starlight through the bond that tethered them, whispered into the ruins of his mind, "Wake up, Smith." And he did, gasping, broken, alive. The first thing he saw was her face, not glowing, not wrathful, not divine, but human in the way gods only become after they've wept. Zelia knelt beside him, her hair disheveled, her tunic torn, her skin cracked where she had overdrawn her own essence to hold him together. Her hands glowed with residual blue fire, her palms hovering above his chest, where faint lines of silver scars pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. She didn't need the words. Their bond said everything. "You were dying," she projected, her voice quivering, fragile as a songbird in a storm. "I was," he rasped. "Why didn't you let me go?" Her fingers brushed his jaw. "Because you didn't let me die." They were inside the stolen Vex scout ship, small, fast, half-ripped from its dock during the sanctum's collapse. Zelia had dragged his unconscious body through the debris like a dying star, dragging the remnants of a solar system behind it. The sanctum, the living prison, the parasite hit, was gone, reduced to ash and light. The Vex hierarchy had been decapitated. Vorlo was dead, their godless machine cult scattered. But they weren't safe. They were fugitives, now wanted by an empire that had never known fear until now. Zelia had named the ship the Hearth, a word she had taken from his first wish. a place of creation, of warmth, of beginning. 6 months passed in the quiet drift of space. They hid within the spirals of the Kalin nebula, cloaked by charged particles and shifting magnetic storms. Kalin spent his days reinforcing the hull, modifying the engines, carving new tools from scavenged alloys. His forge was now a box bolted to the back of the ship's storage chamber, but it sang when he worked. Zelia explored sensations she'd been denied for millennia. The taste of hot tea made from rehydrated herbs, the brush of cloth against her skin, the prickling numbness of her fingers after holding metal too long. She was no longer bound by rituals or expectations. Her body was hers, her will was hers, and she gave it freely to him. Their bond was more than mental now, it was instinctual. When Kalin slept, she dreamed with him. When Zelia meditated, he felt the solar winds of her memories brushing his soul. But it wasn't without scars. Some nights, Kalin would thrash awake, calling out names, long dead Lyra, Era, Anna. Zelia never tried to quiet him. She simply held him, letting him cry into her lap, her hands combing through his sweat-soaked hair, humming tunes from forgotten worlds. Other times, she would freeze mid-conversation, overcome by flashes of her people, their laughter, their light, their screams. Then it would be his turn. "You're not alone anymore," Kalin would whisper, his hands gently covering hers. They were rebuilding not just each other, but something new, something powerful. Then came the signal. It arrived as a flicker on the ship's long-range sensors. At first, Kalin dismissed it a dying satellite maybe, but it pulsed again, and again, a rhythmic pattern. Not Vex, not mechanical. Alive. Zelia leaned over his shoulder, her eyes glowing faintly. "It's psionic," she said softly, but, human. Kalin ran the sequence. The frequency was familiar, eerily so. It matched the harmonic signature he had poured into the resonance key, the one forged from grief and defiance, the one Zelia had synchronized her soul to. Somewhere out in the dark someone else was, singing the same song. Could it be survivors? He whispered. Zelia closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "No," she said. "It's awakened. Someone is forging." Kalin stood, a strange electricity racing down his spine. Not fear, not hope. Purpose. They looked at each other. The air between them crackled. "Then we're not done," he said. "No," she replied. "We're just beginning." He walked to the helm, his hand gripping the controls like he would grip a hammer. The coordinates blinked on the display, distant, buried in uncharted sectors. Zelia joined him, her fingers resting on his arm. "They'll still be hunting us," Kalin warned. Her lips curved in a slow, dangerous smile. Let the Vex tremble in the dark. Let them fear to ghosts forged in fire." Kalin nodded, and together, they turned the hearth toward the stars. Not to flee, but to build a future the galaxy had no defense against. The stars whispered. Kalin stood at the viewport of the hearth, watching the signal grow, stronger, its pulses now steady, its rhythm unmistakably human, but not like Earth's humans. This signal was shaped, focused, forged. Someone out there was using psionic frequency as an art, not a weapon. Someone had heard the resonance. Someone else had survived. Behind him, Zelia stirred from meditation, her presence brushing his mind like silk woven through fire. She no longer hovered in his thoughts as a visitor. She was a second soul, layered over his own. Where his dreams ended, hers began. Where his memories cracked, she filled the void. "You feel it too," she said, voice soft but taut with anticipation. "I feel the song," Kalin murmured. "It's ours, but not from us." Zelia's eyes glowed brighter, to nebulae blooming inside her skull. "Then they've awakened. Fragments of the pattern. They carry what you carried, what we carry now." He turned to her. "If they're like me, they're running, bleeding, fighting, or worse, serving. No, she said, stepping close, her hand slipping into his. If they're like you, they're resisting. Kalin nodded. The course was set. But he had a feeling, one deep in his marrow, that this wasn't just a remnant calling for help. It was a summons. The hearth dropped out of lightfold. Near a collapsed system, a shattered star at the center, its debris forming a dense, rotating field of molten glass and ice. And at the edge of it, half buried in an asteroid, was a structure. It was not Vex. It was human-made, but ancient. A settlement, abandoned and broken, vines of metal strangling its infrastructure. The signal was coming from beneath it, pulsing from the fractured hull of an Arcship-class lifeboat Earth-made, but modified with psionic latticework that shimmered faintly. They landed in silence. The airlock groaned as it opened. Kalin stepped onto the derelict hull, his boots crunching against frost-laced metal. Zelia followed, her form subdued, but her aura thick with warning. The Vex might not have found this place yet, but others could have. They entered the structure. What greeted them was not what they expected. Bodies, but not corpses. Statues, dozens of them, humans, mid-movement, frozen in place, expressions locked. In moments of panic, wonder, grief, a child reaching upward, a soldier screaming, a scientist cradling a data pad like a relic. Each of them calcified into psionic crystal. Kalin stepped closer to the nearest one, dread thick in his throat. It's not death, Zelia whispered, her fingers touching the statue's surface. It's containment, a failsafe. Against what? Kalin asked. The answer echoed in his mind, not from Zelia, but from below. A voice, male, old, scarred. Not what, who. The walls vibrated. Light flared from a deep access corridor. The signal was reacting to Kalin, resonating in reply. He followed it down into the depths of the Arcship, Zelia at his back, the glow of her power illuminating the path like a flame in the bones of the dead. They reached the core chamber. There, slumped in a psionic cocoon, was a man, human. His chest barely rose. His skin was marked with glowing silver lines, identical to Kalin's, a resonant scar. Zelia gasped. He opened his eyes, and the moment he looked at Kalin, their minds collided. Memories, fire, screams, a battlefield of thought. Kalin staggered, catching himself on the wall. The man spoke aloud, voice broken. You built the key. Kalin stared. How do you know that? The man laughed, a dry, bitter thing. Because I built the first. A stillness fell. Zelia's voice sliced through the air. Impossible. The resonance frequency was singular. No, the man said. It was classified, buried, lost, but not gone. He pointed to the cocoon walls. We tried to stop them. The Vex, long before they reached your world. We built weapons out of willpower, defenses out of memory, and then we were betrayed. Our own kind sold us for peace. Kalin's stomach turned. And this, our punishment, psionic stasis. A prison with no time, a tomb that sings forever. Only one of us escaped the freeze, just one spark. One ember. Zelia stepped forward, her voice sharp. Who? The man looked at Kalin. You. The silence was cosmic. Kalin's mouth went dry. I'm a copy. No, the man said. You're the remnant. A resonance echo left behind. But you grew real. You forged yourself. The bond with her that made you more. Zelia's hand found Kalin's. Then why call us here? Kalin asked. The man's expression hardened. Because the Vex are recovering. Faster than we imagined. And they're building something worse. They've taken the blueprint of your key and corrupted it. Zelia's breath caught. They're making siphons, she whispered. Billions of them. To harvest psionic hosts, the man said. Across every species. Across time. Kalin's heart pounded. Then we need to destroy the factories. The man shook his head. Too late. He held up a crystal shard singing with faint blue light. We need to awaken the others. Kalin looked around the room of frozen bodies. You mean unfreeze? Them. I mean, ignite them. The same way you were. Zelia stepped forward, brow furrowed. That would cause a chain reaction. Yes, the man said. It'll burn this world clean, and kill you. Kalin asked. The man nodded. Kalin looked at Zelia. She was already seeing what he was seeing. The blueprint, the sacrifice, the cost. He took the shard. It felt like a hammer in his hand. One swing, one choice. He looked at the man. What's your name? The man smiled faintly. You, he said, are my name. Kalin turned and brought the shard down. The signal exploded outward bright, wild, alive. From orbit, the hearth recorded it all. A world lighting up like a dying star. One last flare of defiance burning through the void. In its wake, the song changed. It was louder now, and it wasn't coming from one voice anymore. It was a chorus. Kalin turned to Zelia as the shockwave passed through them. They're awake, he whispered. She touched his chest, where his scars now glowed brighter than ever. Yes, she said, and we're no longer alone. Together, they boarded the hearth. The stars were calling, and this time, they weren't running. They were leading.